on time, and we are 1 minute behind. So I'm going to have the great honor of introducing some members of my team and a member that we've adopted from VISN 6, and then I'm going to get us started. So thank you so much for the few and the mighty that are here with us at the very end of this conference. I so appreciate you being here, so give yourselves a hand. So I'm Dr. Autumn Lowry. I'm the Suicide Prevention Program Manager for the Mountain Home VA Medical Center in Johnson City, Tennessee. This is Tori Dreyer. She is one of our community engagement and partnership coordinators, and she works out of Johnson City as well. This is Amy Jones. She is our CEPC in Knoxville, Tennessee. And then this is Jonathan Calloway, and he belongs to VISN 6 at the Charles George or Asheville, North Carolina VA. So thanks for having us. We're really excited to be here. So today we have the distinct honor to talk about, I call this work the hardest thing I ever left behind at the VA. And I haven't left it, obviously, I'm presenting, but I handed it off to these beautiful people. So I was a CEPC formerly at my site, and then I got promoted to the program manager role, and I was devastated to leave this work. So I'm really excited to be here today to get to present on how it all started. So we are talking today about a population of people who are near and dear to our hearts. So I'm going to give you a warning. We are feelers in this room, so if we get a little emotional, just go with it.
Love that.
Again,
Yes.
I've been at the VA for almost 10 years, and this is the work that I never wanted to leave. So it is near and dear to all of us. So this is a story about connection. And so today, our format, we are going to tell this like the acts of a play. I'm a thespian, and for those of you who don't know what that is, in my spare time, I like to be involved in my local community theater. So theater actually plays a little bit of a part of this work, and I thought, what a great way to structure this, and I think Jonathan was maybe the brainchild behind that. What a great way to structure our presentation than to tell it in acts of a story or a play. So that's what we're going to do. So this play or story is about connection and relationship, which if you know anything about the CBI-SP model, and if you don't worry, I'm going to talk about it. It's all about relationship, engagement and relationships. So that's what we're doing today. And the relationship we're talking about is between two VA facilities, across two VISNs, and across a beautiful mountain in the Appalachian region of North Carolina and Tennessee, and with a community of the most resilient people I have ever met. So this is our prologue. This is how it all started. So the VA and tribal nations, again, a story of relationship. Now I'm going to pause here and say, any language or titles that I use and any of us use in this presentation are preferred titles by the Eastern Band of the Cherokee Nation. So when you see me refer to terms like Indian and not use terms like Indigenous or Native American, they have chosen those titles, and we are honoring that today. So I wanted you all to be aware of the language. So the key players in this story are the Eastern Band of the Cherokee Indian Tribe, EBCI. These are tribal veterans and service organizations and its members. So when we refer to them, that is who we are referring to. The Cherokee Central School and the Cherokee Indian Hospital. And I'll talk about where all of that's located in just a minute and why that's important. And then Veterans Affairs and the VHA, so our Health Administration. So our VISNs are 6 and 9, and VISN 6 is in Western North Carolina. And again, that's out of the Charles George VA, and that's important in a minute also. And then the Mountain Home VA facility. So those are our players. Our location is Western North Carolina, East Tennessee. Many of these veterans that we're going to talk about today get their care at either or sometimes both facilities. We are really close to each other, nestled in the Appalachian Mountains, and there's just a big mountain between the two facilities. And so veterans kind of choose which side of the mountain they want to go to get their care. So there is the location for those of you who enjoy maps. All right, so a little bit of history about the EBCI Nation. So Cherokee Indians descend from people who have occupied the southern Appalachian Mountains since approximately 8000 BC. Their distinct Cherokee language emerged by 1500 BC. So for those of you who have heard of Sequoia, that is the language that we're referring to. That is the Native American who invented their alphabet. The Cherokee once occupied 140,000 square miles, later to become a part of Georgia, South Carolina, Tennessee, Alabama, and North and South Carolina. Okay. I just referenced Sequoia. Between 1838 and 1839, our U.S. government forcibly relocated most of the Cherokee from their homeland to present-day Oklahoma, known as the Trail of Tears. A small number of Cherokee remained in North Carolina after claiming state citizenship. In 1868, the federal government recognized those who remained and their descendants as the Eastern Band of the Cherokee Indians. The EBCI is the sole federally recognized tribe in North Carolina. And they emerge as the first Native American Alaskan Native tribe with a written language. Of course, that was developed in 1821 by Sequoia, a statue present there. So the EBCI today, they have 16,000 enrolled members. It is a sovereign tribal government with an elected principal chief and vice chief. So that's their government structure. And then EBCI has 12 tribal council representatives and a judiciary branch as well. This is a picture of where they are located in the Qualla boundary. I will tell you, this is the picture that tells everyone why I never left East Tennessee. This is where I live, and it is like this most of the time, breathtakingly beautiful. So the Qualla boundary is owned by the EBCI. It is 45,000 acres. North Carolina counties within the boundary include Cherokee, Graham, Haywood, Jackson, Macon, and Swain counties. So it's a big, big area. And due to the Qualla boundary being legally owned by the tribe, their land is not a reservation. So you will not hear us say that. They live on the Qualla boundary. So again, that language is important to them. So some of their core values are spirituality, connectedness to their land, their sense of humor, which is one of my favorite things about this community, childhood education, and also supporting that education throughout. They send almost all of their children who want to go to college and things like that, so education is incredibly important to them. Good character, group harmony, and then connectedness to the tribe and its customs and its history. We're going to talk a little bit about why history is important. So veterans and the EBCI. So pictured here is a statue of Charles George. You heard me reference him a few minutes ago when I was talking about Asheville. So the Asheville VA is named after Charles George, and Charles George is referred to often by members of the EBCI as their war hero. They are very, very proud of Charles, and his statue stands in both Cherokee, and the same statue, also a replica of it, or a duplicate of it, is also at the Charles George VA. American Indian and Alaska Native populations have among the highest military service rates per capita of any ethnic group. EBCI is comprised of 800 to 900 veterans. This VA healthcare system's main hospital, of course, is named for one of their Korea-era U.S. Army soldiers and veterans, and he was awarded the Medal of Honor posthumously. So that is a little bit about Charles. As we have heard probably in several presentations by now, our American Indian and Alaska Native veterans are at greater risk for suicide, and we are seeing that number increase. So that's what this slide is referencing. These are some of our heavily impacted groups in 2021. I won't delve into all of that because you all have heard that, but these are the areas that we are focused on. And of course, our American Indian and Alaska Native veterans are why we're here talking about this today. I know all of you have seen this in various presentations as well. This is our unadjusted suicide rate. Okay. So VA suicide prevention and community. We're going to talk about why suicide prevention is everybody's And I told you I would talk about the CBI-SP model. So for those of you who haven't heard of this, the CBI-SP model is the community-based interventions for suicide prevention, and it is a unifying model. So as part of our local suicide prevention teams, our CEPCs go out into the communities and they focus on a few areas in which they are trying to strengthen community relations, particularly in rural communities. So those focus priority areas are identifying service members, veterans and their families, and screening for suicide risk, so that risk ID we talk about so often, promoting connectedness and improving care transition, and my personal heart and passion, and I know Tori's as well, is increasing lethal means safety and safety planning in these communities. So I told you we were going to do this in Acts. So that is all the history and the foundation of who the folks are and the folks that we are serving. And this is how all of this came to be and how we got involved. So Act 1, that was me. So enter stage right. This was me and one of our peer support specialists. So what we did when the community engagement program and the CBI-SP model was rolled out, I was the first CEPC, and my colleague Stephanie, we were the first CEPCs that were hired in our healthcare system in this area. And we started doing environmental scans and landscape analysis for all of these communities that we knew were at greater risk for suicide. And this was before this annual report came out, but we knew that this community particularly was at greater risk. We also started looking at how significant their veteran population was. We also looked at access to healthcare and realized that 4 to 5 months out of the year, this population is essentially trapped on the Qualla boundary because of snow and ice. And so they shut the roads down in and out of that community for several times in the year, several months. And so they only can access what's on the boundary. And they have incredible healthcare facilities, but they cannot access either VA. And so we identified them as a community that we really wanted to get involved in based on all of those factors. And so we are in VISN 9. VISN 6 at the time was a little bit closer, and technically we talk about catchment areas, right? Technically it's their catchment area, but we had a lot of their veterans coming to our facility and they didn't have a CEPC program at the time, and we thought they need help, like let's start, and hopefully when they get a CEPC we can rope them in and we can all help together, right? That was our goal. And so the peer support specialist and myself started to look at stakeholders. Who are the stakeholders in this community? And who we identified was it was their VSO, and also he served several roles. He was a former tribal council member, the VSO, and he was the employment specialist for veterans at the time. So he wore a lot of hats. He was a very busy man, but we reached out to him and he agreed to hold a meeting with us. That meeting went really, really well. We figured out he was incredibly passionate about suicide prevention and mental health access, particularly for the tribal nation there. And so he said, I really care about you guys and I want to get you in. I'm going to get you a meeting with the tribal council. And so this went from like, we're just going to go in and maybe like talk to them, and then it's like, we're going to put you in front of the whole tribal council. And I was like, I don't belong in front of a tribal council. I do not have a right to be here. And he's like, you're gonna be fine. So he invites us to the tribal council. We walk in, and then we're told that not only are we going to be in front of the whole tribal council, but that it is broadcast to every member of the Cherokee Nation across the nation. So thousands of people are watching, and I thought, I am not prepared for this. But I put my pretend hat on. I told you I was a thespian, and I knew if I was passionate that, and I am, obviously, about this work, that I would be okay on some level. So I just was like, maybe they'll know that I care. That's all I want them to know, is that I care. And so our peer support specialist told them who he was, and then said, and she's the one with the pitch. And so I walked up and I told them, I am not an expert in your community. I am a suicide prevention expert. I am a subject matter expert with lethal means safety, and I have looked at numbers and data, and I know just this much about what's happening to your people and the suffering here, but I would love the opportunity to know more and to learn more about what's going on from the real experts, and that is you. And they looked at me, and then they looked past me, and our VSO friend, our stakeholder, was in the very back row, and they said, "Do you trust her?" And he said, "I do." And they looked at him and they nodded, and they looked at me and they said, "You're welcome to try to do some work in this community." And that was it. And that's how it started. And so, what I did in my approach as I started the very foundational work is that I honored the history, not only the horrific history that this nation has with the federal government, but with the VAs itself. And so, the first several conversations we had, we would kind of set up at the American Legion post, and we're gonna talk about that in a minute, or we would set up at the museum. They have a beautiful museum there, and people would come talk with us. So we set up in several different places. We went to the school, the hospitals, and talked with folks just to get an idea from the experts of their own community, what they saw as barriers to care, or what they saw that were strengths in their communities, what their resilience factors were. We wanted to hear from them. And so when we did that, I always approached as, I know that this is probably not easy to invite someone from the federal government, let alone two healthcare facilities who you have felt haven't done the outreach and haven't honored Charles George, haven't honored your legacy, even though our facility, one of the facilities is named after him. They had told us all of that. And so I just sat in it with them and said, I know that, I hear you, and I just want you to keep talking to me. Like, I just want, if it's okay, I just want to keep sitting in this with you. So for the first few months, we just sat in pain and trauma every time we went and listened. We did not talk. We kept our mouths shut and we listened. I learned such incredible stories from them. I learned so much about who they are as people, and all those core values were just beaming out of them. And that 2.5 hour drive that I was making out there was the quickest and easiest drive I was making in those rural communities, because I knew when I was going to get there, I was going to get to hear real, raw, vulnerable stories, and I may get the opportunity to help. And so I used trauma-informed approach, put my clinical hat back on, and like I said, I sat and I listened. And what I discovered was, as we kept going out, we started to get to share stories. I wasn't just listening, they would invite me. I never shared without an invitation, but they started to invite me to share my story, or stories that I had heard, stories that we had experienced at the healthcare facilities, and we started to build trust, because we weren't just sharing stories, we were sharing lived experience. And for those of you qualitative people in the room, you know how powerful that can be. And so we started to build a sacred trust. I went from an outsider who belonged to the federal government, and also, although I was still very much those things, I am a white woman who is not a member of their community, and I absolutely work for the federal government, so I was still those things, but I went from just those things to someone they trusted, and a friend of their community, and an ally of their community, which was incredibly powerful. And so we started, after that trust started to be built, we started to get to look at different stakeholders. So I met some leadership at the American Legion, and I'm gonna let Amy talk a little bit more about the American Legion, but it is the oldest Native American Legion in the nation. And they're very proud of that, and it is incredible to get to bear witness to their meetings and the way that they run things. So we started to figure out that a lot of people that had power or investment in their community in some way went to the American Legion. And so we got to meet a lot of them and get them excited and involved in the work. And then slowing the sprint. So if you can't tell, I have a lot of energy, and this is like day 3 of a really long rate conference, right? My brain is really full. I have a lot of energy and a lot of passion. So I was going full speed ahead. And Laura, my former boss, was sitting back here smiling at us. I would talk to her and I'd be so, and I hate to admit this, but it's the truth, I was frustrated. I was like, Laura, I haven't gotten an email in like 3 weeks and I'm trying, and what if they don't like me anymore? What if they don't trust us? What have I done? And Laura was like, Autumn, this is not a sprint, this is a marathon. And I have now gotten to pass that sage wisdom to these 3 because working with this tribe taught me patience unlike anything. And I'm a mom, and I'm a teacher, and I'm a social worker, and I did not have enough patience for this pace. And so they have taught me that we are going at their pace, and that is whatever they determine it to be. And so I had to just slow down. So I took my running shoes off. I'm not a runner, I'm a walker, but I took the shoes off. And I decided that Laura was right, as much as I didn't want her to be right about that one particular thing, and I had to slow down. So I had to not just accept, but expect to have 3 or 4 weeks of lag time between emails. And when the weather was bad, 6-8 weeks between visits, 10 weeks sometimes, depending on ice and snow. And so that was a difficult lesson for me, but I learned it. Trust, realization, and of course the foundation. So as I slowed down, I continued to build that trust and build that foundation, because I knew that if we were going to get a foothold and make any progress on some of the things this community had identified as need to help prevent suicide and to increase access to mental health for those veterans, I knew that we had to keep building that foundation. This trust was an invaluable gift. I don't know if I can even put into words how much of a gift this was, but I will say, and again, I'm not going to get too far ahead of myself because I want these wonderful folks to talk about what they got to do, but when I had to pass the torch, so to speak, to Tori and Amy before Jonathan came on board, I was a wreck about it, and I trust these women wholeheartedly. We all worked together on the homeless team prior to coming to suicide prevention, and we have been through a lot together, the 3 of us. And so it wasn't about trusting them. It was about having to leave this work behind, and my fear that that community that I had worked so hard to build trust with would not trust them the way I do. And when I was passing the torch to them, they did the same thing that they looked at our VSO in the back that day at the tribal council, and they looked at me and they said, do you trust them? And I said, I trust them beyond. And they said, then they're welcome to do work here. So that's how I was able to pass the torch and leave behind-ish, even though I still medal all the time as the program manager. That was how I was able to leave behind the greatest thing I've ever gotten to do at the VA. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce our next player, which is Tori for Act 2.
It's not fair for you to get teary and expect me to be there. Isn't she cute? So when I got into this work, kind of elaborating on what Autumn talked about as far as the slowness of the work, but before I get into that, how many CEPCs are actually in the room? Okay, so if you're a CEPC, you're going to understand what I'm about to talk about and really, really appreciate it. If you're not a CEPC, you're going to understand our work in a clearer, maybe, perspective. So when I got into this work, I came from micro. Like, I spent the last 23 years doing micro work, right? You're jumping, you're going, you're keeping up, you're seeing patient after patient after patient. And then I took this job and I was like, what's going on here? The macro, which I embraced at the beginning, I had no idea. So I kind of made a joke. The CEPC work, spirit animal, is the sloth. Okay? Like I said, if you're CEPC, you're going to appreciate these next few things. But spirit animals, by definition, they're guides, they're protectors. They help us navigate life, right? And for us, they help us navigate the work. And so I thought, I kind of went down a rabbit hole with the sloth, and I discovered some things about the sloth that was just representative of the CEPC, so if you'll indulge me. One of the things about sloths is they are their own ecosystem. Their fur inhabits about 850 other creatures, including algae and moths and bugs, and it really may have you think twice about ever snuggling with a sloth if you ever get the opportunity. But that's what CEPCs are, right? As CEPCs, we kind of carry and we navigate this world and this ecosystem around us in our communities and the work that we do, okay? They are 3 times stronger than humans. 3 times stronger. And you're like, well, what's the connection to CEPCs? Communities are stronger than any one individual. And our work is so enmeshed into our communities and learning to navigate those communities, and there's no 2 communities that are the same. The third thing is these guys can fall out of trees at 100 feet and not injure themselves. Okay? So, what does that have to do with CEPCs? We're going to fall, we're going to fail, and what matters is that we get back up and we try again, because maybe what worked in one community is not going to work here. You've got to be innovative. You've got to be willing to really think outside the box and let them navigate you. And the last one, you're going to really think I'm probably distorted. They can actually starve to death on a full stomach because their bodies are regulated by their outside environments. They're not internal. So as CEPCs, we're based in the communities, right? And we can be full of passion and full of drive. But unless we can find that in the communities and help the communities find that, sometimes the work can die down, right? But we can still be full of what we do and try another way. So, all right, thank you for indulging me. So if we enter stage right, Amy and I were introduced, and there was luckily some communication that happened, and Autumn was able to kind of keep contact with the stakeholders that she had established. I think there was about a year?
About 8 months.
8 months between her taking on her new role as the SPM, and Amy came in on January of 2023, I came February 2023. So there was a lapse there. But she was able to do a warm handoff, which was incredibly helpful because she had done so much work. And we knew, among everything else that Autumn has kind of talked about, we knew that we had two places we had to be. The post and the post. Right? Because that was our end, right? So we found out that they had a coffee social that they actually call a BS session every Thursday. So we put it on our calendars that we were going to go every first Thursday. And we just showed up. And they have their post meetings every month. And we decided we would come quarterly so that they didn't think that the federal government was really encroaching their area. We didn't want to be too overwhelming. So we started attending those quarterly. And I know for me, the coffee socials were, when we first started doing it, it was at the post, and they had this patio that was covered, and they had a table, sometimes 2 tables and chairs. And the first time we went, we kind of had chairs that were on the outside, and the veterans were kind of around the table, and they would talk and do their thing. And we just kept going. And every now and then, they would maybe ask us a question. And we found that our chairs kept getting closer to the table. And, I talk about this last visit that we had actually 2 weeks ago. We were actually at the table. We weren't on the outside anymore. And it was a significant difference of, they weren't just telling stories, they were getting more personalized, and they were carrying on what they had shared with Autumn, and they were sharing more with us about how they felt with the VA. And we just listened, we just listened. So showing up was really important, doing what we say we were gonna do. They have events in their community, and if they asked us to be there, we came. We didn't care. We were gonna show up because they needed to know. They didn't care what came out of our mouth. They cared what we did. And by showing that is how we continue to build the relationship that Autumn had done such a great job starting. And we listened. So with all that, I am gonna pass it on to Jonathan, or, nope, Amy.
The non-thespian, so, sorry. But,
Turn that on the bottom.
oh, is it still on? Okay.
Can you hear me? Oh, yes. Oh, I can hear myself. Okay, so yeah, I'm the non-thespian, so I hide behind a podium and that's about all you get from me. But, so of course, you know, we started with VISN 9, and where are we going with this inter-VISN collaboration? Well, I wanted to really focus before, you know, I hand it over to Jonathan, which is a really big part in this, is that we would not be anywhere without the Steve Young Deer post. They have been very integral in allowing us to do our work, and we do feel that we can share a lot of our efforts towards suicide prevention, not just within the post, but within the boundary itself. But I wanted to give you a little perspective about their post because it is super interesting. If you go and you walk into the front doors, you walk into a museum. It has got military memorabilia and relics that date back to World War I. And it is everywhere, pristine. You won't find a dirty glass case anywhere. They take really good care of it. And if you walk into their meeting hall, the first time I walked into it, it was very breathtaking because it is a huge round room. And the first thing I noticed at the top, it has the Cherokee alphabet all the way around the top. There's not a big part anywhere on the walls that you can fit anything else because it is all taken up. And you can just see the pride that they take in their post, which actually is very, very heartwarming for me. And it kind of leads into what the coffee socials and the post itself. But I wanted to share a really breathtaking moment that I had, a humbling moment of where I felt like we were in and we were part of that group is me and Tori drive up for our BS session and we start walking up and Warren, who is our go-to guy with the post, he is our spark. I think we've heard that in our CPC calls before. But he's now the commander of the post. He wasn't at the time, but he stops us and he says, hey, do you guys wanna go with us? And me and Tori are like, okay, where are we going? And he's like, we're gonna go to tribal council meeting. And we're like, yes, we finally get to witness what Autumn got to witness that we were like, we'll never get to witness that. So we end up following going and we sit in the back of the room because they were there supporting a veteran who was presenting, it was something that they were presenting to the council to help other veterans if it got passed. So it was really neat seeing it, and yes, it is televised and scary, if you think about it. And after we walked out and we were there, Warren was explaining who everybody was. He was very good to explain stuff to us on our level so we can understand what was going on. And he says, so you guys can talk in front of the tribal council about your suicide efforts. We can make that happen. And like I think all the blood in my face ran out and I turned pale because I'm not the thespian. So I told Tori, I said, well, I would love to, but you're doing all the talking. I'm just gonna sit there for support. So that just kind of shows that it takes a while to build that trust with them because we have been working there for a good year and a half because this wasn't too long ago. And it just is a very humbling moment for me to share that they do trust us enough to be able to give us that audience of the entire boundary, not just the post itself. With VISN 6 coming on board and kind of packaging up all of the collaborating that we're doing, and Jonathan, I think, has the best piece of everything. It shows that it does take kind of all three of us, because if I can't be there, Tori can be there, and if us two can't be there, then Jonathan can be there, and that's what's needed for this community, because if you don't show up, it's detrimental. They don't really communicate by emails very good. If you want things done, you have to be consistent and show up. And that's how we're able to do that with all three of us teaming up together. So, but I'm gonna turn it over to Jonathan and let him talk about his wonderful piece. And I think Jonathan is the vital piece to everything that's making everything happen there, so. It's all yours now.
I don't know about vital. I think we're all vital in this, but so in 2023, VISN 6 at the Charles Storage VA hired the new CPC position, moi, and it was almost instantaneous that, I think on Amy, Tori and Autumn's part, is like, okay, we need him, to be a part of this yesterday. And of course I was a little bit nervous about, would they accept me? Would they, coming from this perspective of being an outsider, but then realizing the backstory of how, starting with Autumn and building the trust and building that foundation and them vouching for her, and then her vouching for Amy and Tori, and then all three of you all vouching for me. It was a situation where I feel like you all have done like the lion's share of the work about getting this rolling, and but I also, as I rode the coattails into this relationship, I also am saying that from the perspective of never wanting to take that for granted, because I know that when we're talking about a relationship, it can be, all the work that can be built up can be easily, destroyed if you don't have the right, way of going into it. And so I really followed their lead, and the community's lead, and just listened, just continuing to show up, continuing to stay true to our word, to show that we care. One of the things that I got in terms of feedback was that, when it came to our VA and the relationship with the Eastern Band of the Cherokee, to put it mildly, the feedback I got was that it was pretty lukewarm. And so I realized that one big part of what I needed to be doing was to warm that relationship up and to help begin that process of, repairing the relationship, bridging the gaps, opening that channel of communication, not just with the VA and the Eastern Band of the Cherokee, but also VA with VA with within my own medical center, interdepartmental and programs, communication. What was I saying here? There was a special moment some months into me getting, into getting to know the members of the tribe. Of course, I was, seen as an outsider. They had vouched for me, but there was still a lot of, we don't know this person. And, I'm also really grateful for the trust that not only, Amy, Tori, and Autumn had to have me come in to assume that I was going to be, I wasn't going to disrupt things, but also that, I am so grateful for the trust that the Cherokee took at their word, that I can be dependable and that I'm, a person that can be vouched for. And so, if we're talking about in terms of framing this as a story, in terms of framing this as, we are all characters in this story, the last thing I wanted to play in this role was the antagonist. And so, hopefully that's not been the case. One very, very, very stark moment for me that comes to mind in terms of, that's like, wow, I feel honored to be let into this sort of sacred trust. I was at the American Legion, and they had brought out these big boxes of these ceremonial eagle feathers that, only the, Native American people are allowed to have. And I stood sort of to the side because I didn't want to intrude and, insert myself into this space. And a couple of the guys kind of waved me over, like, come on, come on over here, And so I stepped into it, and, we were passing around these giant, ceremonial eagle feathers that are very sacred to the tribe, and being allowed to, pass these around with the other members as an outsider, but now, getting a sense that, maybe I'm being a little less of an outsider than I once was. I'm not Cherokee, but I'm a person that they maybe can vouch for. And I looked at that moment as, like with those eagle feathers, in many ways, those types of feathers really correlated a lot to relationship. They are priceless, they're timeless, they are sacred, they're delicate. And so wanting to treat the relationship with the people that I've grown to get to know at these outreach events, at these socials, at the Tribal American Legion, wanting to treat it like that, as something sacred and delicate, and also strong too, strong as well. Let's see here. So in terms of the work that my role as a CPC has been doing, it's been centered around repairing the relationship specifically with our Charles George VA and the Eastern Band of the Cherokee. Because the feedback that we had received was, to put it mildly, it was pretty lukewarm. So I immediately wanted to get into that that type of engagement with that process to see what ways can we bridge those gaps and repair that relationship. And that's come through really just making sure that our VA is aware of what is going on, on the Qualla boundary, any outreach events, any type of events that we're being invited to, that we want to make sure that we are doing our very best effort to make those events, to show that we care about this community, which, has a propensity to be, and to feel isolated. And one of the comments was that, there was a sense of, there's a lot of respect and honor for the hero, Charles George, who served in the Korean War, and who, but did not seem so much that honor and engagement with perhaps Charles George's descendants. And we wanted to honor the descendants and that next generation of the tribe. And so in terms of maintaining that link, so that newfound bridge between VISN and VISN 9 has really allowed for a lot of continuity for maintaining the relationship between the VA and the Eastern and the Cherokee. CPCs from each VISN, so a good example, coming for, Cherokee is not the easiest place to get to. Coming from Asheville on one side, coming from Tennessee on the other side. Oftentimes during the winter months, a lot of times the weather would lend to road closures, especially on the Tennessee end. And so I would cover for, those weeks that, Amy or Tori they weren't able to make it, and I would come in. And so we would make sure that there was this continuity of, the most important thing is that we continue to show up, whoever is showing up, but it's just making sure that we're showing up. And on the flip side, I'll just add one more thing. As I covered for the inclement weather, my coworkers here graciously were able to cover for me over the last about 3 months or so when you never know when life's going to turn on a dime. One night I went to my fridge to get a jar of pickles, and the cat ran under my leg. I tripped over the cat, went down with the pickles. Pickle jar didn't shatter, but my ankle did. And yeah, make it make sense. But guard those right ankle, friends, because you can't drive. And so while I've been on the mend for that, my Amy, Tori, y'all have been just so important in terms of keeping that continuity going. So in that sense of, so just adding also that, as we continue to add patches to that quilt, and on the note of quilts, I'm gonna hand it over to tell a story.
So we wanted to tell a couple of quick stories about some ways that the Cherokee have given back to us. We've talked a lot about what we have done to honor them and to make sure that they are the driving force behind their own community's work. But we wanted to briefly talk about things they've done for us because this is the most giving community I've ever worked with. So this quilt that you see on the left, there's a special story behind it. If you all have heard of they're called different things in different places, but the honor quilts and things like that are given to veterans and wrapping them up in the warm hug for comfort. So my counterpart, who is now a VJO, but she was a CEPC at this time, is a veteran, and we went to the post one day for a meeting, and they surprised her with this. So they didn't tell us much. They just said, hey, we want you to come to the post meeting. That was pretty normal for us. And then they called her up to the front. This is the most beautiful one I've ever seen. And they spread it out, and they had a ceremony for her. And of course, she was baffled and surprised. But we were all just really tearful, and they said they wanted to honor her specifically for her veteran service, but also for she and I coming into the community and showing them that relationships between the federal government, particularly the VA facilities, and the tribe could be repaired. And so they gifted her with this. And Tori, I'll let you talk about the challenge point.
So we were a couple months in, and we had come to a Legion meeting, and I believe it was Warren who came up to us, and if you're familiar with challenge coins, and everybody in this room should be familiar with challenge coins, right? They give us a challenge coin. And it's unique because it's in the shape of an arrowhead. Both sides are just gorgeous, with each branch of the military on one side, and then the tribal stuff on the other. So it was a way of them saying to us, thank you for coming, thank you for showing up. So very humbling moment.
Absolutely, and I'll say too, so I forgot to say this at the beginning, we showed a picture of the theater, which was supposed to remind me to say this. So I told you guys I was in thespian. One of the first conversations that I had with Albert, who was the ESO, was he asked me what I liked to do in my free time. Like, nobody asks social workers that. I've never been asked that, I don't think, especially in a professional setting. And he said, I want you to tell me about you. I want you to tell me about your family, about why you care about this work, and I want you to tell me what you do in your free time. And I was just taken aback for sure. And I told him, well, in my free time, the copious amounts that I have, I like to find myself in the theater. And I said, you know, actually, I've been to your theater before as a little girl, because I grew up in those mountains, and that's how I first learned that we had Cherokee in our area. And I was like, so that's how I learned about you. The first time I went to the Boundary, the gift I was given was that he drove me out to the theater, and we sat nestled in those beautiful Appalachian mountains that have kept me in Tennessee all my life. And he said, I want you to tell me about you, and I want to tell you the story of our people. And he told it to me in the amphitheater there in those mountains. And he said, I brought you here because this is where you're comfortable. And I thought, I don't deserve this. Like, I'm coming in as a stranger and an outsider, and he took the time to take me to a place where I would feel most comfortable in his community, to ask me to tell him my story and to listen to his. So I wanted to share that. And then this last picture, you'll notice that Jonathan is wearing what is in this picture, and I'll let him briefly tell you all about that before we wrap up.
Get back to the mic because I don't project well. So, this necklace, it's hard to talk about tearing up a little bit. I was at the Tribal American Legion Post, and while I was there, the members had, who were speaking, and they came out with this beaded necklace with this onyx stone. And they said, kneel your head over. And so I'm like, okay. So I kneeled my head over, and they placed this beaded necklace over my neck. And they said, this beaded necklace was, first of all, made by the family of Charles George, the great nephews. And the onyx stone is a medicine stone. And we weren't sure who to gift this to. The Cherokee are very giving people. And they said it represents medicine. And we decided that in the work of suicide prevention is something that, from our worldview, is a spiritual. The spiritual dimension really trumps so much of all of it, and that the work of suicide prevention is medicine to the soul. And so we couldn't think of a higher form of making that available to someone who's in that type of work. So when you wear it, think about the soul medicine and the work of suicide prevention that you're doing. And I will just never forget that moment. And no words.
Thank you, Jonathan. So I'll wrap us up. I wanted to say this collaborative effort, I know we take it for granted, and I will own that, because Jonathan has been incredible, and so have Tori and Amy about me saying, hey, VISN 6 hired somebody, we gotta get on that. And then Jonathan being like, oh my gosh, yes, of course I would love to work with you. And I know that's not always that easy to call another VISN and say, hey, we encroached in your area. We'd also like you to come and join and take over this massive amount of work. So I will say that it takes people who are dedicated to the work, and it takes people who are willing to do the crazy things, like when someone shatters their ankle to drive across the mountain back and forth multiple times. It takes the passion and the willingness to do so, and I'm proud of these folks who have done that. So some plans that, they are working on, it's very early in the stages of coalition work, but they're seeing fruitful results from their efforts. They're promoting an art writing therapy event, they're hosting VHA and VBA benefits and enrollment fairs, and a potential partnership with the school. They're focusing on suicide prevention in their student population, because they have had, recent student suicide, and they called us. And they're like, well, you know, that you work for for the VHA, but what about students? And Tori called me and said, can I do this? And I said, no hesitation, absolutely. So they're working on some of that. And I wanted to let Tori very briefly tell about the, mobile registration that you all did.
So 2 weeks ago, anybody ever had a travel pact act done? Yeah, so they're impressive, right? So the first one ever, was done on the boundary, about 2 weeks ago, and, they were expecting maybe 40 veterans to come out. They actually ended up with 93 coming through, and if you're not familiar with the Tribal Pact Act, they do, not only, they file the claims, but they do the assessments and they do the evaluations. So there was one veteran in particular that I shared with them, that it was a woman veteran who had come in, and she was at one point 100% and had lost that 100%. She came into the PACT Act, refiled the claim, went through the evaluation, went through the stuff, and her 100% was reinstated on the spot, along with a lot of back pay. So it was just nice and warming to see that, because she was so just relieved to have that. So, you know, there's so many things within VHA that sometimes we're aware of and not aware of, even if we've been in it. You know, I've been at the VA 12 years, and I'm amazed almost daily at programs that I didn't know about myself. So, if any of you are working with any tribes, please know that that is out there, and it can be done, and it's extremely beneficial to that community, especially when we talk about the mountain being in the way.
Yeah. So when we talk about carrying on this work and our goals, this quote is so great: preserving the culture and passing these traditions, our ways, our stories, our songs, our dances, our material culture down to the future generations. We're focused on seeing these things into the future, and that's really the ultimate goal. So our goal is to honor their goal, which is whatever it takes to keep them well, keep access open across that mountain between both VA facilities in VISN 6 and VISN 9, and to ensure that we show up. Showing up for them with whatever we can has been the most impactful work, and that sounds really simple, and it's not. But for them, it has been everything in repairing the relationship they had with the Charles George VA, and also building and strengthening a tense relationship they had with the Mountain Home VA Medical Center as well.
Can I add one thing?
Absolutely.
We recently had a conversation with someone, you know, in tribal leadership, and he said, and I quote, you know, I know that, you know, anytime I can give you guys a call and you'll be there for us. Mm-hmm. And that, I don't know if that is something that would have been said 2 years ago.
It would have.
And it's, yeah.
It was single-handedly the best compliment I've ever gotten.
Yeah, yeah.
Because he just looked at us and he said, I know that if I had something come up and I needed one of the three of you here, you would somehow make it happen. And I was like,
that's it.
That's
That's what we've been working on. And so I know we didn't leave any time for questions. We are happy to hang back and take questions if you guys want to talk more to us about this work, but I do believe on ending on time and honoring time. Thank you so much for being such a great audience.